Hello, and thank you for taking time to spend with us on this topic of discovering a parallel universe where VDI is a reality. My name is Anthony Schubert, and I am the Director of Sales for Meridian IT. We are a Chicago-based value-added partner for the solutions we'll represent today, amongst others. I'd also like to represent the partners that are included in this offering, which is Nutanix, VMware, Brocade, and Unidesk. Joining me today is also Senior Engineer and VDI Guru, Mr. Doug Campbell, who will be running most of the demo this morning. And what we intend to present is going to be perceived as indeed a parallel universe, which is where VDI is a reality. So we're going to transfer controls over to Doug. And on the screen, you can see that there are 25 virtual desktops that are presently in the off state. And so our intention here is to simulate what a school lab experience would be as the students are getting into the classroom and booting up the machines. So, Doug, if you don't mind, can you initiate the launch of those machines as if all those students had just walked in and hit power?
Sure, I'm going to go over here. As you can see, they were in the Unidesk console. You can see that they were off. I'm now going to power them all on here in vCenter. And I'm just highlighting all the machines. And there they go. They're all starting up now.
Wonderful. So while we're waiting for those machines to boot up briefly, we're going to go into review a story that may be familiar to most of you. So a long time in a galaxy far, far away, or maybe not so far and not so long ago, this might have been an image of your IT help desk stuck trying to support laptops and desktops. And then it came to look to this as finals came around and labs are slow or down or full. Students are banging on your doors trying to get in to finish up their papers. But then you said, wait, I have an excellent idea. That sales rep that came in last week, he told me about all the great benefits of VDI, that's what it was, desktop virtualization. All those features of increased flexibility. Well, I could definitely use flexibility. Simplified management. Well, I've got a short staff or a shrinking staff. I could definitely use some of that. Enhanced security, that's always a concern. My vice chancellor is banging on me about that. Centralized control, again, limited staff, that would certainly help us distribute out all of our applications. Remote access to applications and data, of course, that's going to be easier if I don't have to physically touch these machines. Disaster recovery, we don't really have a mechanism for that in place right now, so that would be helpful. And, of course, cost savings. In our budget shrinking days now, who doesn't like that? So, yep, you know what, that's the ticket. And so off you went to build yourself some of that VDI. But while you're cruising down that road with this fantastic idea, you hit a few unexpected roadblocks. First of all, hardware specs. Will my existing servers work? What about the network bandwidth? Are we up to snuff there? How much memory do I need to support all these virtual desktops? And how much storage? And what kind of storage? Do I need it to be dedicated hardware? Or can I repurpose some of the existing infrastructure I've got? And then, of course, software. Do I buy VMware? I've heard about that. Citrix, I have some of that. Do I save money and go with Microsoft with my campus agreement or N Computing? I've heard that's pretty cost-effective. And then what do I need to do for licensing with my Microsoft licensing I have already, or my other software vendors, Adobe and Final Cut? And then, of course, there's the client side. What will their experience be like, and how do I know that I can deliver the same performance that they're getting off of a regular desktop? Does everyone use the same resources? Do we use desktops or thin clients? And then there's those engineering labs. They can't require the same amount of necessity, right? And then the management. Which tools do I use? I've never had any experience with that before. I'm used to using Ghost to do images, and so how do I manage that? Can I have different images for different labs and classrooms and staff and faculty? How do I virtually update applications? Do I virtualize applications or the entire image? And then there's the final product. I don't have any experience in this, so who do I hire to install the equipment, and how long is that going to take? And what are the best practices for the installation, both initially and moving forward? Do I do it all at once, or do I roll it out in phases? And then what if I need support once it's up and running? And then, of course, the big question folks above us are going to ask, how much is it going to cost? And how do I budget for it? Is it less expensive or more expensive than just simply buying desktops and laptops and monitors the way I've been doing for years? So those are all these questions that you pose. But in the meantime, while we address those and get ready to address them, let's jump into the land where all is right with VDI. So let's head through the wormhole. I'm going to go and give controls back to Doug. So as you can see now, all of our machines are on and ready for students to work with. Doug is going to show some features of the environment, but to give you an idea of some of the components that are running behind the scenes in this lab, for hardware, we have Nutanix's hyper-converged, high-performance distributed file system for compute and storage, and that's coupled with Brocade's low-latency networking. Our software is VMware for VDI delivery and Unidesk for application virtualization and delivery. So, Doug, if you can, why don't we start with the Nutanix and show some of the key features of that.
All right. Let me go over to the Nutanix console. You can see this is the home screen. This gives you a basic overview of your environment. To the left, it gives you a storage summary, your VM summary, and then, of course, the bottom left, it gives you a hardware summary, how many blocks, how many hosts you have, what model it is. The middle gives you a brief idea of how your cluster is performing. Farther over to the right, you get your alerts, and then all the way to any events that are going on. If I wanted to deep dive a little bit, I can go down and go into the storage area. And you can see you've got 10.2 terabytes of free physical space. The thing I want to point out is there's only one storage pool and one container. You don't have to mess with volumes or nodes, or LUNs. It's very easy to configure, very quick to get up and running. This is also giving you sort of an idea of your IOPS it's producing. Obviously, it's not heavily used right now, so there's not a lot going on. If you wanted to deep dive into analysis, if, say, you were having an issue or you just wanted to see how it was running, and this is completely configurable, you can go deep into this as you want to. And that's a nice overview of the Nutanix.
I see there's some spikes here, Doug. Can you talk to what those spikes are a cause of?
Those are just as we powered on those 25 machines. It spiked briefly and then went right back down.
And then you mentioned that there are 3 nodes in this particular Nutanix box. So if I wanted to add more nodes or if we wanted to grow this environment, can you talk a little bit about how that would go?
Sure. This model supports 4 hosts, or nodes. So if I wanted to upgrade this, I just buy another node, I push it in, I go into the management console and say add node, and immediately adds it into the storage. So my storage goes up, my CPU and my memory all go up. Very simple, very easy.
Regardless of however many nodes that you have in the environment, it's all going to be viewed from this same console and it'll all show up in the same area?
Yeah, so even if you add another block, it's all going to be right here, one pane of glass.
Great. Well, why don't we move over then to Unidesk and poke around there a little bit?
All right, as you see, this is the desktop view. You can see that all those desktops are up and running. So if I go down into the layers view, and you can see that I have about 8 or 10 application layers installed. And you can also see that I only have one OS layer. So basically, you can create as many different applications as you want, and you only have one image. And if I go over here to templates, you can see I have 2. So say for your basic users, admin people, secretaries, you can have a template that has whatever applications they need. And then as an example here, I've got an accounting template. So all your accountants might need another completely different set of applications. So as you're creating machines, all you have to do is pick the right template, and boom, it has everything they need. And as far as if you wanted to update an application, it's literally just clicking on it and adding a version to it. And I would put like version 1.1 or 1.2, and then I just basically click down. I could put in a description if I want, and I pick my OS layer, which I only have one. I pick one of my install machines. These are read-only machines, and I would go down to the next screen. If I need any prerequisite layers, let's say if you're installing an application that has a prerequisite of something like, say, Java or Adobe or something, then you can select that, and when it makes this virtual machine to install the application, it will have whatever prerequisite it requires. And then I would just create it and then update my app.
Doug, I have a question. In schools, often you have older applications that have requirements for, say, an older version of Microsoft or an older version of Internet Explorer. So can you have multiple versions of applications available in an image so that those users can still support those older applications as well as the newer ones?
Yes, you can, and a prime example of that is IE6. Many older applications were based on IE6, so you could create an IE6 layer along with the current version of IE, which I think is 13, and then you could run both of those inside the same virtual machine at the same time. So yes, that's very possible.
And then also another question for you. So the difference between doing this in Unidesk and doing it in VMware View, can you talk a little bit about that and how the image is handled if you were just to use View versus adding Unidesk on top of that?
Well, in View, if you're going to use just standard View, you'd either have to load your applications inside the image, and then you're probably going to have multiple images to support all your different use cases. Or you'd have to use ThinApp, which basically streams the app, but of course ThinApp is not perfect, and there's many apps that cannot be streamed, so you're going to be forced to have multiple images, which now you have to keep track of all these multiple images. Where with Unidesk, you can have one OS layer or one image and have multiple different use cases. And the OS layer is basically just as thin as it can get. It's basically just Windows 7 or Windows 8, and that's all there is to it. Printer drivers, software, anything can be created as a layer.
Perfect. So, Doug, another question for you is, how much easier does Unidesk make dealing with issues that users have when they log in? So, in the case where typically if a desktop went down, they call into help desk and you got to send someone out to pick up the desktop. Maybe talk about what a troubleshooting situation would look like for somebody that had issues with their virtual desktop.
All right, let's take my desktop as an example. Let's say I was thinking one day and clicked on an email and I had a virus. So now my desktop is infected. All I have to do is call in. The help desk personnel goes in here to repair, and then you can see there's several options here. If you look down at the bottom, you'll see that I have 3 different days that I can restore from, and I have options on what do I want to restore. If I want to restore everything, I would click both. I would come down here and click the day, and then I just would finish this right down through. When I hit finish, it shuts down my machine. It restores it back to the date that I picked, say yesterday, and it powers it back up all in about 5 or 6 minutes, and now I'm exactly as I was yesterday. And this does not affect any data that you saved. This does not affect user data. This would just put the machine back in the state that it was the previous day.
So you mentioned user data, and I know that some of the debate is persistent desktop versus non-persistent desktop, and brings up the debate of storage utilization. So can you talk a little bit about how Unidesk can give you the best of both worlds?
All these desktops you see here are persistent desktops. In a normal VDI world, that wouldn't be good because you say this is a 30-gig image, you'd have multiple 30-gig images out there. But with Unidesk, since it's a layered approach, you only have one OS, and they all point to that layer. Same with all the applications. You only have one instance of each of those. So when you boot this up, it's very similar to a linked clone. The space utilization basically have persistent desktops with the utilization of using linked clones. So it's very, very small.
And I see there's a storage report on the right-hand side there. Can you go to that and show us what that is?
This is just giving us a quick showing of how many copies are stored of every different thing, how much it's using, and how much it's required. And if you look down, you can see Windows 7 Enterprise is the biggest. This is actually a good example. If you install a layer, it only stores what it actually needs. So like you can see, the remote experience agent, that's only a 0.7 gigabyte of storage that's used, but there's only one copy of it. I could have 100 virtual machines using that, and there's still only 0.7 gig of storage used.
Great. So talking about updating applications or even patching with Unidesk, how does it make those two processes easier as a VDI administrator?
Well, as an example, say it was Patch Tuesday, or you had to do some security patches for your operating system. You would come in here, you would click on your image, you would do add a version. As I did with the software, you would then come in here, put the version number, whatever that, and that's required. And then you could put in your description, security patches, whatever, and then you select your install machine, and then you go through a little menu, and I create a version. What this does, it creates a temporary virtual machine for me. I install my changes. When that's done, it'll say it's deployable again, and then I just go to the desktops, highlight them all, and do edit, desktop or desktops, go to the operating system layer, and if I was going to actually, I'd be going back, but I select that new version of that layer and hit go, and then you have an option. When you've made a change, you can have it doing based on your maintenance schedule, which currently this is set for like 11 o'clock at night, or you can do it now, or you can do it at a set time, or you can wait when the user logs off at the end of the day, then it'll update that desktop. So basically I make one change, and all my desktops are done.
Great. So keeping with the same vein of comparing Unidesk to VMware View, Doug, can you go over and show us the VMware View tab and essentially highlight how the image is just the base image and how little management needs to be done in that version?
Sure. First I'll go over here to the View console, and those are all the desktops. Now, I have two pools. One's a standard View pool and one's a Unidesk pool. If I go into this pool, go to inventory, it looks very similar to the Unidesk. But you do very little from here. You basically manage it all through there. Now, if I come down here to vCenter, And if I come down here to the bottom, you can see there's my gold image. That's the only one I have.
So once you set up the gold image and you create these pools, then most of your maintenance and administration is being done in Unidesk. Is that right?
Yes, you do almost all your maintenance within Unidesk. And basically, just to show you, when you create an OS layer, it imports the settings from that golden image out of vCenter. And at that point, you never touch that golden image again. All changes are made at the OS layer here in Unidesk.
Thanks very much for that demo, Doug. We're going to come back into the presentation and revisit that material. So coming back out of that wormhole, thank you again, Doug, for showing us all the easy ways to manage our environment. So now let's revisit what we were looking at previously. The first issue that we faced, obviously, was the hardware, how to predict this. As you can see, Nutanix is a very scalable solution, can be added per node. Brocade is a very high-performance networking product, so there's very little latency behind the application, which would be an issue for our VDI infrastructure. And then your existing network infrastructure will work and it can be cohesive with this environment, be that Cisco, HP, Juniper, Brocade, etc. Software, as our recommendation is indicated, VMware in combination with Microsoft VDA licenses or virtual desktop licenses, plus your choice of antivirus. Any of these will work. Trend Micro, Symantec, Kaspersky, they're very friendly within a virtual infrastructure. On the client side, that's where Meridian comes into play. We'll do a pre-deployment assessment to answer that question of what your client user base is like, how they act. Are they tasked users? Are they high-end users? Are they very basic users? And then based on that, we'll do an environment right-sizing, which includes the equipment we've presented today of Nutanix, Brocade. And then we'll have a deployment plan depending on what those use cases are like, including engineering lab support. We'll do QA testing, and we'll support that client hardware. From a management perspective, as Doug showed so well, Unidesk plus VMware tools as well as the Nutanix management console will make that very easy to deliver that environment. And then your final product. As part of this presentation, Meridian IT will deliver a turnkey implementation that includes all of these components. In addition, we'll provide knowledge transfer based on the best practices that Doug clearly exemplified. And then we'll provide ongoing support even after that implementation is put in place to make sure any tweaks or changes or best practices that come up between installation and moving forward will be addressed. And then ultimately, that most important question, predictable cost. So as I'm going to present here in the next couple of slides, we do have a cost per seat model. As most of you probably have in your organization, you have a defined cost for your desktops and your laptops and possibly even some of your internal labor costs when you do refreshes, be that a 3-year cycle or a 4 or 5-year cycle. So we're going to provide you with a cost per seat that manages to that in those same terms as options. We'll also provide a scalable flat cost as you grow in this environment so that you can have predicted costs. You can present that to your executives and your financial folks within your organization. And we can also provide a TCO and an ROI that is less than your current PC refresh spend is today. So how do we deliver that? Again, we have a cost per seat model, as you can see an example here, which is showing 250 users as a starting point, just as an example. We've broken this down as a cost per seat per month on the left side, and more importantly, a cost per seat per term, 24 months, 36, 48, or 60. As you can see, the cost for a very common refresh cycle, as an example, is 36 months at $884.52 per person. Compare that to maybe your desktop refresh cost. Maybe your desktop is $650, $700. Your monitor is $200, and your internal costs are another $100 or $200 to deploy those machines. So you're well over $1,000. So as you can see, even at the starting point, after you make that infrastructure investment and the services that come along with it, you're still at a cost per seat that's less than what you're spending today on your desktop refresh. But to show a more dynamic example, let me also show you how that cost per seat will stay the same or even go down as time goes on. So as you can see on the screen, we started with that 250 user example. Let's plug in 500 users. So you did 250 for your first phase, and now you're ready to go into phase 2. So we're going to go into 500 users. So this example will show you that not only does the cost stay the same over that 36 or 48 or 60-month period, but it actually goes down. So obviously the more you deploy, the more the cost is going to be reduced. Let's say we do 1,000. Again, the cost goes down again. We're now down to $725.96 for a 3-year cycle. So the intention being that this is a predictable cost that you can support not only in the first phase, but the entire phases as you go through this process of rolling out VDI into the environment. And again, this is all based on a turnkey solution provided by Meridian with post-support that lasts the life of the cycle of these machines. So in closing, we'd like to thank you for your time today. Hopefully this presented a good view of what desktop virtualization could look like in a model that's very sustainable, easy to predict, and easy to deliver. And once again, thank you, Doug, for providing us with that demo.
My pleasure.
And we thank you again. And if you have any questions about what you've seen today, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you very much.